folks, I'm Allie Buchman with the Potomac Bead Company, and I'm going to show you how to do the star flower bracelet today. It's using a lot of great check products, including flower cups here, and the flower cups are going to be a 7x5 millimeter, and they stick up right in the middle. When you turn the bracelet to the side, you can see that it is a three-dimensional bracelet. To get that leaf effect, we're using SuperDuos. And then I'm using 2 colors of 11O seed beads. In the middle here, you're gonna hit a little bit of the RounDuo beads. You can see them better on the back. We're gonna be using those as well. For colors, I've chosen some colors in the kind of red and rosish color, and then some green ones for my petals here on the sides. So flower cup wise, I'm using the Magic Wine. That's also one of my 11O colors. I'm using the galvanized apricot gold in the 11O. So those are my 2 11Os. And then I'm picking up the Jade Picasso for my leaf color here. As far as RounDuos, I'm using the Aztec Gold RounDuos. And then I'm going to close it all off with a red Picasso cup button, which will pick up nicely those colors of the Magic Wine. As far as thread goes, I'm using 0.006 Wildfire beading thread in a green color. And you will need for this project 2 size 10 needles. I have sitting handy my thread burner, or the thread zap, so that way I can zap and the thread and cut it that way. I have a needle nose pliers to flatten out my thread after it's burned down at the edges. I'm working on a bead mat, and a good thing always to have handy is some super new glue in case you want to glue and add thread anywhere. This is a multi-layer project, so we're going to be actually building the top layer here first around the SuperDuos, and then we're going to come back, we're going to add some of the sides, and then the third thing we're going to do actually is pop the flower cups up into place. Because it is 2 needles, we're going to be using 1 piece of thread with 2 needles on either end, and we're going to be attaching our clasps right away to our project as we're working with it, so we won't need to attach the clasps after the project is completely done. We'll be doing that as we come back and go along the base of the project. As far as quantities go, you're going to be looking at about 11 or 12 flower cups depending on what your wrist size is. For a smaller wrist, a 6.5 inch, you're going to be looking at 11 or so flower cups. Larger wrist, perhaps 12 or a little bit more. If you know that you have a bigger wrist, you may need to add a couple beads to the end. 11Os, you're going to get just a couple 11Os from each tube, so you'll have plenty if you have a tube of those. And the same with the SuperDuos. You're going to use about 44 of those, 4 per flower if you're using 11. And then the RounDuos, you're going to use about 10 of those, because those are going to go to separate your flowers when you're working with them. So to start out, like I said, it's a multi-level. What I'm actually going to be working with at the top here is I'm working with my SuperDuos and my 11Os that are going to be around the flower cup here. I'm switching my colors, and I'm going to use the gold closer to the flower cup, and the Magic Wine color that I've switched out for this galvanized mauve I'm going to use on the bottom, so that way the flower cup sticks out a little bit more. When you're working with it, I have a needle that I've put, or I'm sorry, 2 needles that I've put on 1 piece of thread. It's about 5 feet of beading thread. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to be starting right here at the start, and I'm going to put on 3 beads onto my needle, and I'm going to drop that back to the middle of my thread. So it doesn't really matter which needle you put it on, but you want to drop those 3 down to the middle of your thread. On my right needle, I'm going to put a SuperDuo, and on my left needle, I'm going to put a SuperDuo. After that, I'm going to put 3 11Os onto each needle, which is going to be followed by a SuperDuo. 3 11Os are on the right now, and 3 11Os go on the left. I'm going to let those drop down next to my 3 original beads, creating a circle effect is what I'm going to create. The 3 is going to be the number that's going to be on the sides of those flower cups when you're looking at it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a crisscross. I'm going to have 3 beads that I put on either my right or my left needle. I'm going to take those down, and I'm going to cross my thread through in the opposite direction through those same 3 beads. I'm going to pull nice and tight then, and once I'm pulling, that's going to bring that rounded circle and come together. You can see now that's where those flower cups are going to kind of pop out the middle of that. At the same time, I'm going to go through my SuperDuo that's next to those 3 beads, and I'm going to take the thread and needle through the bottom hole, and then I'm also going to go through the top hole. That's going to push a little bit of that thread and see the thread on the outside of my SuperDuo. I'm going to do the same thing on both sides. So I'm going through my SuperDuo that's already there, through that bottom hole, and then I'm going to reverse the needle and come back towards the middle, going through the top hole. At this point, I want to give a nice tight pull and kind of tighten up those threads. Once I have those, I'm going to get ready to add a RounDuo bead. The RounDuo beads are going to get added in the same fashion, basically, as the SuperDuos did, where I'm just going to take one of my 11/0s, one of my RounDuo beads, and I'm going to push that down next to my SuperDuo. While I still have that needle in my hand, I'm going to go over the RounDuo bead up through the side. So you can see I have my thread coming through, I have my seed bead, my RounDuo, and then I'm going to back my needle the opposite way, so that same needle in hand, and I'm going to go through the top hole of that RounDuo and give a little pull. So you can see it's just kind of hanging out right there right now, and it has the thread showing and exposed on the side. I'm going to pick up the other needle. This is my right hand needle. I'm going to put on an 11/0 seed bead. I'm going to go through that same RounDuo through the first hole, the bottom hole, closest to the SuperDuos, and then I'm going to reverse it and go through the top hole of that RounDuo bead. What that's going to do then is kind of create that crisscross, and I have the RounDuo bead right after. I'm going to put an 11/0 on my right needle and an 11/0 on the left needle, and that's going to complete that X design that I was using and accomplishing there next to my SuperDuos. To get another set of my little petals on here, I'm going to take another SuperDuo on my right needle. I'm through one hole of the SuperDuo, and now I'm going to take my needle and thread, I'm going to go through the bottom hole, I'm going to reverse the needle going in towards the project and go through the top hole of that same SuperDuo. I did that on the right. I'm going to do the same thing on the left, just flipping it over so that way it's more comfortable to hold and I'm beading on the right hand side. Add a SuperDuo, let it drop next to my RounDuo, take that SuperDuo bead, reversing the needle in towards the project, and that's going to expose that thread. So you can see that's a common theme done both with the RounDuo as well as the SuperDuos that are closest to the RounDuo, so it's going to happen each time you add beads. What I'm going to do now is repeat my little circle, and to do that with my right needle in hand, I'm going to put on 3 11/0 seed beads, and I'm going to sew through my SuperDuo on the other side. So you can see those 3 beads just kind of pop in there then. This left thread that's just hanging out, I'm going to pick that up. I'm going to sew through those 3 SuperDuos as well as the SuperDuo, or I'm sorry, those 3 seed beads as well as the SuperDuo on the other side. Trying not to get my thread knotted here. Pick that out. And pull. So basically those 3 seed beads go on, and I come out the top hole of the SuperDuos towards the outside of my project. Now I'm going to basically repeat my patterns. So I'm going in here, I have lots of threads, so I'm trying to push it out of the way for you. So I'm going in here now with my project, and I'm going to put on 3 seed beads, a SuperDuo, and 3 seed beads. I'm going to let that drop down next to my project. On the left-hand needle, I'm going to pick up 3 seed beads, and a SuperDuo. My needle then that's in the left-hand side, I'm going to take that back through the 3 beads that I just put on next to the SuperDuo on the right-hand side. And that's going to circle the project around and create that circle again. So basically the thread's crisscrossing through that. I'm going to repeat again where I'm sewing through the SuperDuo towards the outside, and then I'm going to take that same needle, sew up through the second hole of the SuperDuo towards the inside. I do it with the right hand side, and I'm going to do it with the left as well. Sewing through the SuperDuo towards the outside, and then reversing the needle and thread towards the inside. Once I have that, I go in now and I'm going to get my next RounDuo in place. 1 bead goes on, the RounDuo goes on, drop it down next to my project, and I'm going to reverse the thread just like I'm doing with the SuperDuos. The thread's coming out the bottom hole. I'm going to take my thread and my needle through the top hole of my RounDuo, going in the opposite direction. So I'm coming through my RounDuo and then I'm going back the opposite way. Pick up my other thread and needle here. In this case, it would be the one on the right. Put on an 11/0 seed bead. Sew through that bottom hole of the RounDuo. Sew through the top hole of the RounDuo in the opposite direction, and that's going to put a needle coming out on the right and a needle coming out on the left. On each side, I'm going to put an 11/0 seed bead, and then I'm going to put a SuperDuo where I'm going to sew through the first hole, and then I'm going to sew through the second hole in towards the middle of my project. Do the same thing on the other side, add an 11/0 seed bead, SuperDuo goes on, and then I'm going to sew from the bottom hole to the top hole, going towards the center of my project. This is going to be the whole base of the bracelet. I say base, but it's actually the top. So this is going to be right where my flowers are popping through. So I'm going to be layering it. So I'm going to continue this again till I have 11 or 12 openings, depending on your wrist size. And then we're going to go in and actually add our base level here with our 11/0 seed beads on the sides. So as I'm looking at it, that's going to be the coloring here, or this is going to be the top section and then the base section. So just to show as I'm getting longer, here's what it's starting to look like. And I have on here my 7 of my beads, and I'm continuing on and getting that design. And then what I'm going to be able to do is push my flower cup buttons up to them and do the bottom level. So keep going with that design. Keep in mind it's not the actual bottom, so you do want it to be a little bit short on your wrist because the cup button and everything is going to get added to the base, not to this top area. So just to show you, I've added my 10 RounDuo beads in between my SuperDuos and my 11/0s, and just to show you, when you're looking at the little sample piece right here, you can see how much the bracelet shrinks up a little bit. Lining up the flower cups, you can see how much it's going to kind of pull it back. So I have a rather tiny wrist, but I like to wear my bracelets big, and you can see that my ends almost touch to, or they actually do touch for my bracelet. So if you are wanting to do something that's a little bit smaller, say a 6.5 or even smaller, you may just use 9 of your flower cup, or I'm sorry, 10 of your flower cups rather than the 11 or 12. So it's kind of up to you. You don't actually add the clasp until the very end. There's ways to, or not until the very end, but as we do the bottom row. So there's ways to make it longer and shorter if you want. I actually think I'm going to keep this one for myself, so I'm going to take off this last little RounDuo bead here, and I want to end with one of my little round sections where the flower cup is going to pop out. So I'm back now to where I'm going to show you how we get ready to do the next layer. The next layer is actually going to be, it's a little bit hidden. It's this layer here that's on the side, and then 2 going to the middle. That's going to push this section that we made up a tiny bit. When I'm getting ready to do it, you're going to want to be coming out of one of your last little O sections, your little petal sections. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to be adding 5 of my alternate color, my goldeny color here, my apricot color. I'm going to dump those out. And I was going to switch up colors and then I didn't. So we're going to do the same thing. And I have I'm going to move my SuperDuos and my RounDuos out of the way because I'm finished with those. And I have my needle, the one that's coming out on the left. Doesn't matter right or left. I'm going to add 5 of my apricot color. So I'm adding 5 of those gold beads on the left needle. And then I'm going to pick up my right needle here and I'm going to crisscross through those same 5 beads. When I crisscross through those, I also want to come out the SuperDuo. So one needle is going left to right, the other one right to left. And I'm coming out of the SuperDuo. I'm going to pick up this left-hand needle here and just make sure that I'm coming out that SuperDuo. So there I have the start of the base layer. I have 5 beads on. That's going to be the side here, is to do 5. So I'm going to come down the right side here of my needle, and I have 5 of my golden beads on, and I'm going to sew through the SuperDuo. So I'm going to sew through that outer hole of the SuperDuo. You can see right away that's going to pop that and dome that up. Then I'm going to put on 2 11-O's when I'm on the sides of my RounDuo beads, and I'm going to sew through the next SuperDuo so that I'm coming out towards the outside, and that's going to pop those 2 beads there in play. Then I'm going to do 5 beads, sew through the next SuperDuo and come out right after it. Then I'm going to put on 2 beads, go into the SuperDuo, so that way I'm coming out on the side. So you're going in between those 11s and the SuperDuo. And then 5 more get added, and I pick up that second hole. As you pull tightly, that's going to pop and dome those little sections up. So you're going to have that little dome effect going on. I'll do a couple with the right needle, and I'm going to switch needles and do a couple on the other side with the same needle. It's the easiest to do this once you do have some that you're doing it facing the back. So that way those beads that you are putting on are popping out towards the back, and the wine color is pushed out towards the middle. 2 beads go on, sew through my next SuperDuo, 5 beads go on. So once you get the other side in here, you can see it's really starting to do that doming effect. And as you go further and further along the bracelet, it's going to shrink up. Oh, that one doesn't want to go through there. It's going to shrink up the size of the original piece that you're doing, because right away you're doming them up and shrinking them down a little bit. You're just going to continue going through the bottom here and creating that base for the bracelet with the 5 2 numbers, and continue sewing the beads right in. I'm going to continue doing that the whole length of my project, creating that little dome and popping them up. And then as we get down to the other end here, we're going to add our clasp, we're going to put our flower cups in place, and we're going to add our loop at the end. So I've gotten done my bracelet here, that bottom level, and making that kind of 3-dimensional, and push my beads off to the side. What I want to show you at this point is kind of the shrinkage that happens when you're making it. So I'm making sure that it's all doming the same direction. And when you saw it before, it was touching and going over. Now I have just enough space for my clasp and my cup button. So don't think that it's way too long when you're making it, because you do need it to be a little bit longer than you're thinking that it needs to be, because you're really going to kind of pull it up there trying to do that. If you do get to the end and you realize that it's not quite as long as you need it to be, you can go ahead and add and go from the top to the bottom and add 1 more. But again, if you do those 11 RounDuos and the 12 flower cups, that's going to give you a little bit more length to your project. This again is going to be at about a 6.5-inch wrist. You're going to get then about 6 3/4 and a 7, 7 1/4. So you can kind of think about it that each one you add is going to be about 1/4 of an inch longer. When you're to the end here, what you're going to do is you're going to continue with that pattern and add your cup button in place. To do that, I am going to separate my needles here, and one of my needles, doesn't matter which one, I'm going to add 4 of my 11/0 seed beads. I'm going to go up through the back of my cup button. Then I'm going to add a SuperDuo on. Go down the other side of the cup button and the SuperDuo and come out. When I get to the other side, I'm going to add 4 more of my 11/0s on. And I'm going to sew through the SuperDuo on the other side. So I'm coming out between the SuperDuo and the 11/0. My needle on the other side here. What I'm going to do then is pick this one up to reinforce the clasp. I'm going to sew through all of those seed beads, up through my cup button and my SuperDuo, down through my SuperDuo and my cup button on the other side, as well as all 4 of those seed beads, and come out in between the SuperDuo and the 11/0 bead. Give a nice tight pull from either angle, and that's going to get my cup button right in place. Once I'm here, I'm really going to be working with the back now of the project. So it's kind of funky. You're working with the back, and we're creating what I call these eyes. So you see the letter I, that's what we're going to be creating now and putting our flower cups in place. So I'm going to take my first needle, well, the one on the right side, I'm going to sew through 2 11/0 seed beads on the side here, and I'm on the back of my project. So the dome side is up and the flatter side is on the bottom. I've sewn through 2 seed beads, and I'm going to pick up 3 of my 11/0 beads, and this you really don't see. So I'm going to do these in the magic wine color. So I have on 3 beads. I'm going to sew down my flower cup so my needle's coming out the top. I'm going to add 1 of my gold 11/0 seed beads, and I'm going to sew back down the flower cup. You can see a little bit of extra thread hanging out there. I'm going to sew on 3 more of my seed beads, and then I'm going to go between 2. I'm going to go and sew through the last 2 of the seed beads on the opposite side. I'm going to give a nice tight pull. And then what I'm going to do before I get it really tight, I'm going to pop that flower cup through the middle. And you can see I'm using a little bit of pressure there to do it. Pop it through the middle, and then I'm going to pull nice and tight. That flower cup then is just going to pop right there on the top. It's almost like magic. Give a nice little pull again, and down you are. I'm going to flip over now to the other side, pick up my thread. I'm going to go through the first 2 seed beads just like I did on the other side. Then what I'm going to do is sew straight across all 6 beads. Then I'm going to go between beads 3 and 4 and sew down the last 2. So basically your thread is going to be split over that 3rd bead here in the middle. So you sew through 2, split over the 3rd bead, and there you have it. That's how you're going to do all the flower cups. To get to the next one, all I'm going to do is I'm going to take my needle and thread, sew through the SuperDuo that's already there, and bring my thread and needle through. I'm going to sew through my 2 beads that I put on last time, sew through the outer SuperDuo, and then I'm right to my next area where I'm ready to add my next little eye. Again, to show, I'm going to sew through 2 beads. I'm going to add 3 of my 11/0s. I'm going to add 1 of my flower cups going up through the back. Add my alternate color of my 11/0. Go back through the flower cup, not through the 11-0. That 11-0 is what's holding it in place. Put on 3 more of my 11-0 beads. Go to the opposite side and sew through the last 2 beads. So the first 3 are hanging out there, my needle's coming through the last 2. Before I pull super tight, I'm gonna flip that flower cup down, push it through, give a nice little tight pull. That pops it out on the top. To hold it in place, I'm gonna come now with my needle that was on the left, shorten my thread a little bit. I'm going to sew through that SuperDuo there. And then I'm going to sew through, oops, doesn't want to sew through there. I like to work on the right hand side, so it's always awkward for me to go on the left here. Sew through that SuperDuo. I'm going to turn it to the side so I can do it easier. Sew through the next 2 11-0. Sew through the SuperDuo and through the first 2 11-0s after that SuperDuo. That gets me into the area behind the flower cup. Sew straight across all 6 seed beads. So I'm sewing straight across right behind the flower cup. Give a nice tight pull, and then I'm going to sew through the last 2 seed beads. And while I'm here, because I can, I'm going to sew through that SuperDuo as well. Again, I'll do 1 more for you. I'm going to sew through those 2 11-0s and the SuperDuo. It'll let me do it at once. Yep. And this kind of pulls the whole thing together too. It makes it nice and tight. Got my thread twisted. I'm going to untwist my thread. So I sewed through those 2 seed beads through my SuperDuo. Going to come out between beads 2 and 3 on the side. Add my 3 11-0 seed beads. Add my next flower cup, which I need to get out. Going through the bottom, then out towards the top, picking up one of the golden beads, sewing down through the flower cup, adding 3 more of my magic wine color, going to the opposite side across, and I'm going to pick up the last 2 beads closest to that SuperDuo on the top left-hand corner. Turn my flower cup and push it through to the top. Once you have it through the top there then, once you have it through to the top, you're going to flip it over. Just check it out, make sure it's nice and in place. And this one just doesn't want to go through. Some of the flower cups are just a tiny bit bigger than the others. Come on. I'm going to push that guy through. And this is kind of like an inverted bracelet. You will go. His petals are just a tiny bit bigger than the last one. And once I have him through, then I am going to flip back over, give a nice tight pull, and then switch over to the other needle, sew through that SuperDuo on the side. If you like size 12 needles, now is a good time for size 12s. I hate size 12 needles. I'd rather struggle with a 10. So up through the 2 beads on the side, so up through the SuperDuo. After the SuperDuo, so up through the first 2 11-0s, straight across then all 6 of those beads that are holding the flower cup in place. And then up through the last 2 11-0s on the other side. If you want at the same time, you can go through a SuperDuo. That's going to be the pattern continued, making those eyes. You can see it really well with the gold, making those eyes and popping those flower cups up the whole length of the bracelet. I'm at the point here where I'm getting done my eyes. I'm on the last one, and actually my thread has gotten really, really short for the one needle. So what I'm going to show you is how I end off, and then rather than ending thread, I have enough on the other needle to come back and finish that eye for the last one. So I'll show you if you're getting close to the end and you're running out of thread. Again, I used about 5 feet of beading thread. Once I'm done my last eye, and I've gone through with the one needle and completed, I'm coming out next to my SuperDuo, in between my SuperDuo and my seed beads. I'm going to go to the second bead, between the second and third bead here, and here's where I'm going to start to create my loop. I'm going to put on 2 of my 11-0 seed beads, followed by 1 of my SuperDuos, and then I'm going to put on about 28 of my 11-0 seed beads. This is going to go around the cup button. If you're attaching a clasp or using a wire protector and attaching a clasp, you would do that at this point as well. So I'm just going to do a plain loop to connect to the other side. You could also do peyote on the loop or do a fun little pattern. So that's up to you. I'm just going to do a standard loop. Once I have that standard loop completed then, and enough seed beads to go around my cup button, I'm going to come down the other side of my SuperDuo, and I'm going to skip the middle bead, just like I've been doing with the eyes, and I'm going to go through the 2 there and the SuperDuo on the other side. When I pull tight, that will sit that SuperDuo. Oops, I forgot my 2 beads after. So back out there. It'll let me, let's see if I'm caught. And I need to sew and do my 2 beads after my SuperDuo. That was my fault there. I'm caught in between 2 threads here. When in doubt and you're caught between threads, you can always unthread your needle, or you can go back and you can just look, and usually you'll be able to figure out exactly where you need to take your needle back through. I'm caught between 2 threads here. I'm just going to sew back through. So on this other side then, I'm going to add those 2 seed beads just like I did on the first side, and then sew back through beads 4 and 5 right here, depending on how you're looking. And when I come out then, I'm going to go through, like I said, that SuperDuo at the same time. Give it a nice tight pull, and that'll be my loop then. Connect onto my cup button on the other side. I'm going to go back then, reinforcing, and here's where I said I'm going to pick up that thread and kind of do my eye on this side. I'm going to go back through that eye. Even if I already had another thread going through there, I would do the same thing as well, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and reinforce this whole loop that I just made. So I'm going to go basically back and do the exact same thing, going through my seed beads. Then I'm going to go up through the seed beads and through the SuperDuo, and then the whole way around the loop. If you were doing a peyote stitch, this is where you would do that peyote stitch. If you're not familiar with peyote stitch and you think it might be something that you would like to do, I have lots of other YouTube videos that you can watch to do that. So I'm going the whole way around and down. I'm going to go through my SuperDuo and down my seed beads. And now all I'm going to do is I'm going to get this little end of thread back to the other one right here and tie off a knot. This may be a little tricky because my thread's getting rather small, but I think I can make it. All I do when I tie off my thread too is I do about 2 or 3 usually half-hitch knots, and then I can go in and use my burner and burn my thread down. I'm going to get my thread and my needle out right there. The needles too that I use, these beading needles, kind of nice because you usually can squash a little bit and bend them, and then just take your pliers and they'll keep their shape. Also, it's $2 and some odd change for 20 of them. So I have my beads right there finished. That whole bracelet is finished. All I'm going to do then is take my two ends of my thread that I brought back right next to one another and just tie a knot. If you need to, you can also do a little dab of glue. That's up to you if you're a gluer. So I did this whole thing with just that 5 feet. If you know that you want to make a bracelet that's a little bit bigger, you can go ahead and cut about 6 feet of beading thread. That way you'll have enough, but you should have enough to complete and finish your whole bracelet. Once I have that done, again, a little dab of glue onto the knot. And then as that dries, I'm going to go in with my thread burner. And I'm going to burn down my edges, cutting them off right there at the end. And then burning them down so that I don't have them sticking up anymore. And then your bracelet is complete. So the star flower bracelet is a fun 3-dimensional bracelet that the flowers stick up, but not too much that they're going to get caught on anything. Again, it does shrink up a little bit when you're looking at it and when you're making it. So if you do want a bracelet that's a little bit longer than this one, again, this is about a little bit more than 6.5 inches. You're going to want to do about 11 flower cups. I did 10. You can do anywhere, usually from 10 to 12 is going to give you an average bracelet size wrist. So it's a fun way to use the flower cups, have them stick up rather than just the fringe like I did for the falling flowers. And you can watch the rest of the YouTube videos too to get ideas to use with your extra flower cups as well as some of your round duos. I've used flower cups in earrings and in different fringe necklaces. So it gives you an idea of some of the different things that you can do with the flower cups and lots of different examples using the RounDuo beads as well. Because you will have extras because you're not using a whole tube of either of those. Again, have fun making all these great check products and these great bracelets and necklaces with all the different beads. The 2-hole beads are really fun to play around with, and you can do a variation on design on this. You could do it multiple rows, 3 wide, entering different flowers and different colors in the different flower cups, but I thought it was fun to use this kind of funky wine color and do this magic wine to really make those flowers stick out. Have fun making this bracelet. If you do get a chance, you can check out the rest of our YouTube videos to get other ideas. You can like us on Facebook to get regular post updates, as well as subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you do need any supplies, you can also click on the Show More button underneath, and it'll have a list there of what I used for the video and links to those products. If you're not near one of our Potomac Bead Company stores, you can always order from us online. Thanks a lot for watching, and have fun making this star flower bracelet.